You know someone who makes roughly what you make, same city, similar expenses, and somehow they hit their savings goal in 8 months. You've been at it for a year and you're still not there, and you've done everything right. You tracked your spending, you cut back, you put money away when you could. So what's the difference? Most people assume it's income or sacrifice or some complicated investment trick. But a 2018 study from Northwestern University found the variable that actually separates fast savers from slow ones has nothing to do with any of that. Here's what it is. Most people who are trying to save money faster are focusing on the wrong variable. They're looking at income. They're looking at expenses. They're running the same mental calculation over and over. If I earn a little more or spend a little less, the savings account grows faster. And that math isn't wrong exactly, but it's missing the variable that actually controls the speed. And that variable isn't a number, it's a gap. Here's what actually happens in a typical month for someone who is genuinely trying to save. Paycheck lands on the 15th. There's a brief, optimistic feeling. Okay, this is the month I make real progress. Then the bills come. Rent, utilities, the credit card from last month, then groceries, then a friend's dinner, then a slightly bigger gas fill-up than expected. And somewhere around the 28th, you look at what's left and you transfer whatever that number is into savings. Maybe it's $200. Maybe it's $80. Maybe it's nothing because the car needed new tires. You tried. The month just had other plans. The problem with this sequence isn't willpower. It isn't discipline. It isn't that you don't want it badly enough. The problem is something behavioral economists call temporal drag, the delay between when money arrives and when it moves toward your goal. And according to a 2020 study from the University of Chicago Booth School, that delay is where almost all of the speed is lost. The longer money sits in a visible account, the more the brain unconsciously assigns it to other purposes. Not frivolous purposes, just purposes. Rent, groceries, the car, the friend's birthday. The brain does a kind of automatic ledger keeping, and by the time you get around to the transfer, the money has already been mentally spent 3 different ways. This is not a character flaw. It's a feature of how the brain handles visible resources. A 2019 study from Harvard Business School found that people consistently underestimate how much of their available balance they've already pre-allocated mentally. On average, participants believed they had about 34% more truly discretionary money than they actually did, because the brain had already quietly claimed the rest for upcoming obligations. You're not being careless, you're being human. And the standard advice, budget carefully, track every dollar, wait until the end of the month, and save what's left, is essentially asking you to fight that system manually, every single month, forever, which is why it keeps not working. The false floor here is the assumption that this is a motivation problem, that if you just cared more, if you just committed harder, if you just visualized the goal clearly enough every morning, the money would be there at the end of the month. But caring more doesn't change the sequence. Caring more doesn't stop the brain from doing its invisible pre-allocation. It just adds a layer of guilt on top of a structural problem and calls it a solution. The sequence is the problem, and the sequence can be changed. Here's where it gets interesting. When you start looking at people who consistently hit savings goals faster than expected, not higher income, not some secret investment strategy, just faster. The common thread isn't discipline at all. It's timing. Specifically, it's how quickly money moves toward the goal after it arrives. The closer to zero that gap is, the faster the savings rate. Not because they're saving more per paycheck, because they're losing less to the pre-allocation effect. Think about that for a second. It's not about the amount. It's about the lag. Every day money sits visible in a checking account, it's being quietly pre-spent by a brain that is just trying to be responsible. And by the time you make the conscious decision to save, you're working with whatever survived that process. Some months, that's a lot. Some months, it's almost nothing. Now let me introduce 2 people. Same job, same city, same take-home pay, $4,200 a month. Same rent, same rough expenses. Both of them want to hit $10,000 in savings. Both of them have been at it for about 6 months. One of them has $4,100 saved. The other has $1,600. The one with $1,600, call him the grinder, is doing everything the traditional way. He checks his balance on the first of the month, estimates what he can afford to save, transfers it manually when he remembers, and tracks expenses to try to stay on plan. He's genuinely trying. He's aware of his spending. He makes the transfer most months. Some months he skips it because something came up. Some months he transfers less than he intended. He never raids the savings account exactly, but the amounts going in are inconsistent, and the months he misses are the ones where the gap grows widest. At 6 months, he has $1,600. That's about $267 per month, on average. Not because he's irresponsible, because the system he's using leaks. The one with $4,100, call her the accelerator, set something up differently. Not dramatically differently. She didn't take on extra work. She didn't cut her lifestyle in half. But she changed one thing about the structure of how her money moves, and at 6 months, she has more than 2.5 times what he does. A 2021 study from MIT found that people using automated savings systems saved 2.7 times more than people relying on manual transfers, even when both groups had identical incomes and expenses. The accelerator isn't smarter with money. She isn't more motivated. She just removed the lag, and the difference in her account balance after 6 months is $2,500. That's the cost of the gap. That's what temporal drag actually takes from you, month after month, without ever feeling like anything went wrong. Here's what the accelerator actually did. On the day she set up her bank account, she spent about 40 minutes configuring one thing: an automatic transfer that fires within hours of her paycheck landing. Not at the end of the month, not when she gets around to it, within hours. Before she's bought groceries, before she's checked her balance, before her brain has had any chance to pre-allocate that money to anything else. The transfer isn't large, it's a fixed percentage she decided on once, back when she set the whole thing up, and since that day, she hasn't had to think about it again. The decision was made once, the system runs it every time. This is what behavioral economists call zero-lag saving, and the reason it works has nothing to do with the amount. It's about what the brain never gets to see. A 2018 study from the University of Chicago found that money transferred automatically before a person checks, their balance is processed by the brain as if it never arrived at all. No loss aversion, no mental accounting, no quiet pre-allocation to rent and groceries and everything else. It simply vanishes into savings, and the brain adapts to living on what remains. The grinder, meanwhile, is working with whatever survives the month. Same paycheck. Fundamentally different result. The speed formula isn't willpower times income. It's automation times proximity to payday. The closer to zero the lag, the faster the savings rate. Everything else, the tracking, the budgeting, the careful discipline, operates downstream of that one structural variable. And if the structure is wrong, no amount of effort downstream can fully compensate. So here are the strategies that actually change the speed. The first one is called the zero-lag transfer, and it is exactly what the accelerator used. The mechanism is simple. You set up an automatic transfer that executes on the same day your paycheck arrives, or as close to it as your bank allows. Not the day after. Not that weekend when you have time to log in. The same day. You pick a fixed number or percentage, something sustainable, not heroic, and you automate it once. Then you leave it alone. According to a 2021 study from Northwestern University, people who automate savings transfers have a 94% monthly consistency rate. People who transfer manually have a 32% consistency rate. Same income, same intentions, wildly different consistency. And consistency, compounded over 12 months, is what actually determines how fast you arrive. But here's what nobody tells you about this strategy. The amount matters far less than the timing. A $150 automatic transfer on payday will outperform a $300 manual transfer done whenever you get around to it, because the $300 manual transfer gets skipped 4 months out of 12 and gets reduced 3 more. The $150 automatic transfer lands every single time. Run the math over a year, the smaller automated number wins. You're not failing because you're not saving enough per transfer. You're failing because the transfers aren't landing consistently. That is a structure problem, not a character problem. The second strategy is the friction tax, and this one works on the spending side of the equation. The idea comes from the same commitment device research behind what's sometimes called a Ulysses contract, the ancient Greek story where Odysseus had himself tied to the mast so he could hear the sirens without crashing the ship. You use your present self to constrain your future self before temptation arrives. A 2018 study published in Psychological Science found that commitment devices like this increase goal achievement by up to 74%. The mechanism isn't moral, it's mechanical. Here's how to build one. If you have a spending category that consistently bleeds your account before your transfer date, takeout, online shopping, anything impulse-driven, you add friction. Real friction. Inconvenient, annoying friction. Some people delete saved payment details from shopping apps, so every purchase requires re-entering a card number manually. Some people move their credit card to a different room. One approach that works particularly well. Give a trusted friend a signed check for $75 with permission to cash it if you break a specific spending rule before your transfer date. That's external friction. Social accountability that your brain treats as a genuine threat, not an abstract intention. But here's what nobody tells you. Internal friction, the kind you create for yourself, loses effectiveness within a few weeks because you learn to route around it. External friction, the kind with real social consequences, doesn't degrade the same way. The embarrassment circuitry in your brain never fully adapts to it. The goal isn't punishment. The goal is creating a gap between impulse and action large enough for your rational brain to catch up. Most impulse spending collapses in that gap if you build it correctly. The third strategy is the dopamine redirect, and it addresses something most savings advice ignores entirely: the neurochemical experience of wanting something. When you see something you want to buy, your brain releases dopamine. Most people assume that dopamine comes from getting the thing. But according to research from Stanford, the majority of dopamine is released during the anticipation of getting the thing, not from actually having it. This is why you can be consumed by wanting something, buy it, and feel almost nothing 2 weeks later. The wanting was the reward. The having was just the end of it. The dopamine redirect works like this. When you feel the pull of an impulse purchase, open your phone and write the item down on a list. Call it later, not now, or whatever label makes sense to you. Writing it down signals to your brain that the item is coming, which is enough to trigger the anticipatory dopamine release. You get the neurochemical hit without spending anything. Then you wait 30 days. What research from MIT found is that roughly 95% of items on lists like this are abandoned within 10 to 12 days. Not because the person forced themselves to resist, but because the dopamine wore off and the desire simply dissolved. You save the money without ever feeling deprived, because chemically speaking, you already got what you were looking for. The fourth strategy takes about an hour to run once every 3 months, and then it pays you back every month after that. Call it the quarterly speed audit. Every 90 days, you export your bank and credit card statements and scan for anything recurring, every charge that appears on a schedule. A 2022 study found that the average person guessed they were spending about $86 a month on subscriptions. The actual number was $219. That's not a small rounding error. That's $133 a month. More than $1,500 a year, moving invisibly out of your account toward a fitness app you opened twice in January, a streaming service you switched from but forgot to cancel, a cloud storage upgrade from 2 years ago that you could downgrade for free. You go through the list. You cancel what you're not using. You email customer service for anything you didn't authorize. You call your bank and ask, politely, for any fees to be waived. It works more often than you'd expect. Then you redirect everything recovered straight into your automated savings transfer, not into your general checking account, directly toward the goal. The audit itself isn't exciting. The math is. $100 a month recovered from subscription drift is $1,200 accelerating toward $10,000 without changing your income or your habits at all. All four strategies, the zero lag transfer, the friction tax, the dopamine redirect, the quarterly audit, are the same mechanism dressed differently. Each one removes a specific kind of delay. The zero lag transfer eliminates the time gap. The friction tax eliminates the spending leak. The dopamine redirect eliminates the neurochemical pull toward impulse spending. The quarterly audit eliminates the invisible drain you'd forgotten existed. None of them ask you to try harder. None of them require more discipline. They're all just different ways to close the gap between earning money and that money reaching your goal. You don't need all four at once. One changes things. Here's what this really comes down to. You weren't saving slowly because you lacked discipline. You were saving slowly because the structure around you was designed, consciously or not, to slow you down. Every day money sat visible in your checking account was a day your brain was quietly finding a purpose for it. Every month you waited until the end to transfer what remained was a month you handed the outcome to circumstance. Every impulse buy you negotiated with yourself about was a dopamine fight you were always going to lose eventually, because you were trying to win neurochemistry with willpower. That's not a character flaw. It's a structural problem. And structural problems have structural solutions. The sequence can be changed in an afternoon. Think about what the grinder and the accelerator look like at 18 months. The grinder is still doing everything right in theory. Tracking, budgeting, transferring when he remembers. He might have $5,000 saved, maybe more on a good streak. The accelerator hasn't actively thought about her savings account in weeks. She checks it the way you glance at a plant, not watching it grow, just noticing it's taller than before. At 18 months, her balance is somewhere north of $12,000. Same income, same city, same rent, same groceries, same life. The difference isn't effort or willpower or financial sophistication. It's infrastructure. The decision about where money goes was made once, early, and has been running quietly ever since. She never once had to remind herself to stay on track. The track ran itself, every time. A 2020 study from Princeton found that people who automate their financial systems, savings, bills, transfers, report meaningfully lower financial stress than people who manage the same amounts manually. Not because they have more money, because they're not making dozens of micro decisions about money every week, draining the same mental battery that everything else in their life is drawing from. The system does the work. The person gets the result without the ongoing cost. Here's the thing about reaching $10,000 faster than you expected. The surprise isn't the number. The surprise is that you stopped thinking about it. You set up the structure, changed the sequence, and then you went and lived your life. And some months later, 6, 8, 10, you opened the app and the number was there. Not because you resisted every temptation, not because you tracked every dollar and reviewed your budget on Sunday evenings with grim resolve, because one decision, made once on an ordinary afternoon, has been executing on your behalf every single payday since. That's what faster actually looks like. Not more effort, a better current. And it kept going. You build it once, and it carries you further than effort ever could. So if you've been frustrated by the pace, if you've set the goal, done the math, stayed reasonably consistent, and still felt like you were moving through something slow, you're not the problem. The advice you were using was designed for a brain with unlimited willpower and zero decision fatigue. That brain simply doesn't exist. You are using a method that leaks, and now you know where the leak is. Pick one strategy, just one. Not an overhaul. The single most impactful thing you can do right now, today, is set up one automatic transfer to Fire on the same day your next paycheck lands. Not the amount you wish you could save. The amount you know you can. Automate it. Time it to payday. Leave it alone. Don't pause it when things feel tight unless you genuinely have to. Consistency is the point, and automation protects consistency from you on the days you'd otherwise negotiate it away. That is the whole architecture. One decision, made once, protecting itself from you indefinitely. You're not becoming someone more disciplined or more financially sophisticated. You're removing the structural delay that was slowing the person you already are. The goal was always reachable. The sequence just needed fixing, and you were never really the problem.